I'm Jonathan, and welcome to another episode of the Brewers Cauldron, the series where members of the Roll for Geekiness team talk about some of their favorite Magic Gathering decks and the cards and combos that make them tick. Today, I'm going to talk about the partner pair, Pako and Haldan. Let's go! Pako Arcane Retriever costs 3 generic, 1 red, and 1 green for a 3/3 elemental dog with haste. Pako also has a triggered ability that says whenever Pako attacks, exile the top card of each player's library and put a fetch counter on each of them. Put a +1/+1 counter on Pako for each non-creature card exiled this way. Haldan, Avid Arcanist, costs 2 generic and 1 blue for a 1/4 human wizard. Haldan also says you may play non-creature cards from exile with fetch counters on them if you exiled them, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to do so. While Haldan is less expensive to cast, making it tempting to want to put him out first, Pako is actually the engine that's going to get this deck running. Haldan can come later once there are already a bunch of exiled spells to cast. That said, I feel the pitfall that my deck fell into was focusing way too closely on how Pako and Haldan function. Specifically, Pako doesn't care about creature spells, and Haldan can't cast them. So I didn't include very many in my deck. Ultimately, this meant that I didn't really have blockers, and though Pako is scary enough to make itself a target any day of the week, I wasn't presenting many others to draw my opponent's attention. I also leaned very heavily into top deck manipulation. Partially to make sure that I wasn't exiling stuff that I would rather have in my hand, but also to strategically influence the cards that my opponents had available. Cards like Brainstorm, Index, Lantern of Insight, Ponder, Precognition Field, Soothsaying, Spy Network, The Reality Chip, Track Down, Wizened Snitches, and even Anchor to the Aether and Sweep Away were some of the 40+ cards that did this in some way. I probably should have replaced quite a few of these with anything else. All of that said, I do think that there were a few things that I got right with this deck. As I mentioned, Pako will always be a tempting target. It is a big dog that will just keep getting bigger and potentially hitting people for lethal commander damage. Pieces that protect it, like assorted counterspells, Lightning Greaves, Swiftfoot Boots, Tomio's Safekeeping, Heroic Intervention, Canopy Cover, Whisper Silk Cloak, and Winged Boots are great. You might have noticed that some of these also grant some form of evasion, great for letting me push through that commander damage. And I doubled down on that with a few more pieces like Trailblazer's Boots, Sword Coast Sailor, and Aqueous Form. Some other ways to draw heat from Pako are to make a few extra copies of it with things like Spark Double and Irenicus's Vile Duplication. I also like to double Pako's trigger with pieces like Stronic Resonator and Lithoform Engine, or amplify them in other ways with cards like Passionate Archaeologist and Nalfejni. As I've alluded, I don't play this deck anymore because it just didn't function the way that I hoped it would. The full deck list is on Architect and linked below in case you would like to give it a swing or offer some suggestions. As a reminder, or in case you haven't seen any of my deck lists before, remember to turn on multiple categories features so that you can see where cards might be filling multiple roles in this deck. You'll also see a list of cards that I cut, a list of cards that I was thinking about adding, as well as a wish list for this deck. I do like this boy and his dog, so I may come back to it someday. In the meantime, we'd love to hear your favorite stories about our friends, Pako and Haldan.